The Dark Knight Rises was directed by Christopher Nolan, and it stars Christian Bale, Tom Hardy, Anne Hathaway, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Gary Oldman, and Michael Caine. As I said in my previous videos, this is the third and final act of the Dark Knight trilogy, and the telling of the resurrection of the Dark Knight. To refresh you, Batman Begins was the birth of the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight was the death, and this film is the resurrection. And without a doubt, this is the most divisive film in the Dark Knight trilogy. You have some people that believe that this is yet another masterpiece in this trilogy, and others that think that this film is a complete abomination and the worst thing to happen to the Batman franchise since the Caped Crusader had rubber nipples on his costume. When you compare this film to Begins in the Dark Knight, yes, this film does feel disappointing, but it is definitely far from being a bad film in my opinion. It's actually pretty solid, and an excellent conclusion to a fantastic trilogy. And as always, this review will contain spoilers to The Dark Knight Rises. So if you've never seen this film and you want to avoid any and all spoilers, but you also want to receive my spoiler-free thoughts on this film, I would highly recommend skipping to this timestamp. I will also leave an annotation in the description that you can skip to. Yes, this film is a bit of a slow burn, and it has the weakest pacing in the trilogy, though I respect the decision of having Bruce not become Batman again till like an hour into the runtime. The decisions that the characters made in the previous film have lasting consequences in this film. I really enjoy how this film lingers on those consequences for our characters. It really makes the events of The Dark Knight feel that much more important and that much more impactful. I understand why some people might find the first act of this film boring, but in my opinion, when Batman finally returns, no pun intended, it truly feels earned. And also sorry for using puns when talking about Batman. We all know how well that worked out the last time.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
Nolan also yet again knocked it out of the park with the opening scene of this film. This scene was achieved with 100% practical effects, and that shows. I just love the sheer tangibility of this scene. Just watching the plane crumble in the air and crash to the ground was truly breathtaking to watch. It's very clear that this scene was shot to be shown on IMAX screens, and watching it on my TV just didn't do this scene justice, and I'm truly envious of the people who saw this film in IMAX. Though despite this, I still prefer the bank robbery scene from The Dark Knight. There's just something about the sheer tension and release to seeing Heath Ledger's Joker for the first time that just can't be recaptured. Tom Hardy also does an excellent job as Bane. Even though his performance isn't as legendary as Heath Ledger's Joker, you still truly believe that this guy can punch a hole through a concrete wall. He really makes the physical imposing quality of his character truly believable, even though he isn't roided up like he is in the comics. Some people feel that Bane is just a Darth Vader knockoff. I can kind of see that argument, you know, with the mask and the voice, but the similarities truly end there, in my opinion. Again, Tom Hardy really nailed the physical imposing quality to the character. The only facial feature we see on his face is his eyes, and just his eye movements alone makes this character feel just so menacing. I really love the genre blend and tone of this film. This film feels honestly like a war epic mixed with some post-apocalyptic elements in there. This film truly feels like a war epic, whether it be the big battle scene at the end or just the sheer scale of this film. Christopher Nolan said that this was the biggest film to be made since the silent era, and I personally think that that is hyperbole, but I'm still not going to deny that this film is just huge, and epic is truly an appropriate word to describe this film. There's a lot that happens in this film, and yes, it does feel kind of bloated and messy at times, but I just can't help but admire how much lore and material we were introduced to in just this one film. The way this film is structured is kind of weird, not gonna lie. If you simplify this film down to its skeleton, it's about Bruce rising up and becoming Batman again, and then falling, and then just for him to repeat that process and to rise up and become Batman again. Though this is truly an oversimplification of this film's plot. Bruce puts on the suit for the first time in 8 years for all the wrong reasons during the first act of this film. When you really break it down, at this moment he is suicidal. He knows that going in to fight Bane would mean his death, but he would rather go out with a bang than just wasting away in his mansion. But Bane gave him a fate worse than death, left him to rot away in this hole, and it took him to be put in the worst possible case scenario to rise up yet again and to relearn the value of Batman and to relearn the idea that right now the city needs Batman. My favorite scene in this film is where Bruce rises up from the pit. I just love the themes and just how uplifting and inspiring they truly are. You can be put in the worst possible case scenario, but if you learn to rise up and rise to the occasion, you will become a better person by the end. And I love how you can take away these themes from a film about a guy who dresses up as a bat to punch bad guys. I also love how this scene mirrors the beginning of Batman Begins. At the beginning of that film, if you remember, Bruce falls into a pit and is rescued by his father. Though, in this film, he is put in that exact same situation, but his father isn't there to rescue him, and so he must learn to climb out of that pit himself. And I just love how this scene just brings Bruce's character arc full circle. And when Bruce finally gets out of that pit, all that trauma from childhood just fades away. I just love how this scene alone just wraps up Bruce's character arc in the trilogy so perfectly. There's actually a lot to love about this film. Though I have two major issues with this film, and those are the Talia al Ghul twist and Alfred's decision to abandon Bruce. And I really don't have a problem with Bruce returning to Gotham so easily and them not showing Bruce return to Gotham. Yes, I'm willing to admit it's a bit of a plot hole, but it's kind of nitpicky and it doesn't mess with the overall structure and theming with this film. I think the reason why they kept that out is because it would have messed with the pacing. Even though Alfred's decision to leave Bruce makes sense in this film, when you consider the rest of the trilogy, this decision feels out of character. In Batman Begins, Alfred made it very clear that he was always going to stay by Bruce's side no matter what, and that he was never going to give up on him. Even though the I failed you scene is so emotionally powerful and Michael Caine acts the hell out of it, I'm not a big fan of the decision of Alfred leaving Bruce in this film. It honestly would have made more sense if Bruce actually abandoned Alfred after finding out that he had burned the letter from Rachel. The Talia al Ghul twist at the end of this film was so stupid and convoluted. It felt so horribly tacked on and forced, honestly. It's kind of funny how quickly this subplot got abandoned. I just really wish that they had just cut it out because it really served no purpose to this film, and it just added more to a film that already had minor pacing issues. Though, I feel like if this scene was cut out, it would have resolved a lot of my pacing issues with this film. I really like the ending to this film. I know this might be a little controversial, but I love just how this film ended the trilogy and how just non-concrete it was and how Nolan smartly left the ending up to interpretations. And you know and I know Christopher Nolan loves open endings. So we have two endings, or two main interpretations to this ending. Interpretation number one is that Batman sacrifices himself to save his city and dies a hero's death. And we also have ending 2, which involves Batman somehow surviving the nuclear explosion and going off to retire, knowing that his city is now safe. Even though The Dark Knight Rises doesn't stand as tall as its predecessors, it is still a really solid film and an excellent conclusion to an excellent trilogy. Overall, The Dark Knight Rises gets a B+. So my review of The Batman will come out very soon, and that will of course put an end to my little Batman binge on this channel. Though that doesn't put a permanent end, and that doesn't completely shut the door to the idea of me reviewing the Burton films or that abomination known as Batman and Robin. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed my review of The Dark Knight Rises. And if you did, make sure to give this video a like. And if you want more content like this, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell notification so you can be notified every time I upload a new video. And shout out to Binder Clips and Scott Schreiner. Thanks for watching.